Yeah, I'm sure I am.
Sorry.
Hey, why don't we find some time to have lunch or coffee?
Love that.
Me too. Call me. I'll call you.
Okay.
We'll double the chances.
Okay.
Give me your contact.
Well, I have you and I have exchanged emails, so
Okay, very good.
so maybe I'll email you my phone number.
Great.
You got it here.
Thank you. Hi. Good. Oh my gosh. Good. How about you? It's hard. It's hard. Yeah. That's about it. Hey.
Hey, my brother and sister-in-law are here from Detroit.
Okay.
And
Shall I introduce them? No. Okay. Okay.
but just wanted to introduce you to them. Monday's class, is that?
No.
Okay.
No. We're on.
Only from the Bima last night, they basically said, we're shut down on Sunday. There's nothing going on. And they were specific about the particular programs. Yours was not included, but it sort of raised a question in my mind.
Right.
How deep into the week are they going to cancel?
Well, it's a good point actually. I thought about that earlier this morning, not in terms of that, but in terms of something else. Well, Juliana, and we will converse.
Yes, that's
Talk about it. Okay, how was your trip to Chicago?
very good. Had a wonderful time. Yeah, Chicago's a great town. Despite the cold, I went to a Blackhawks game.
Oh,
and
did you?
At the arena, and then we sat in my brother-in-law's living room and watched the Bears not make it against the Rams.
Okay, I've not been following it this year. Are you into it?
My brother-in-law is. I'm neither a hockey nor a football fan, but he's into it, and so
And you're there. Yeah.
I'm supporting him.
And we're going to Chicago in another 10 days or so for some time.
Excellent.
Great city.
Enjoy.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. You want me to meet your brother and sister?
It's 9:05. It's time to start. I'm telling you,
That's your view.
I'm the director, the producer. It's like you're on.
By the way, I just talked to my partner, Jay. This morning. If you think you're wait till you meet her.
Well,
She's got a lot of things to do. Think about it. And I'm kind of, this is my stance.
let's just say you need a lot of executive function. So her role is appreciated
By whom?
by the rest of us.
That's great. Boy. Does it? Good morning, everybody. So nice to see everybody. When I walked in this morning, Scott, the guard, said, "These are the devoted ones." Oh, of course. We don't cancel Torah study. I remember once some years ago that was a huge snowstorm just as Torah study was a couple of hours away. And there were seven, not that many people, but we made a circle and we had Torah study. Yes, like the post office.
Jordan wanted me to share a quote on that point. We happy few, we band of brothers.
And sisters.
And sisters.
Very nice. Well, so nice to see everybody. Couple of things. First of all, thank you to Nancy Adams for sponsoring the bagels this morning. And let's intensify the applause for Arthur Lavin and picking up the bagels, and Diane as well. Thank you so much. I have a 10 o'clock bar mitzvah next Saturday morning down at University Circle. So I've asked David Singer to lead Torah study next week. And David, thank you so much. And we'll carry on. Lots of applause this morning. Okay, so blessing for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments in joining us to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Just a kind of a word or two about the book of Exodus. It's very hard, though. I've, over the years, had conversations with myself about what is the most important book in the Bible. I always love to have these conversations with myself about different categories, just to see what I think and how my thinking may be on the move. Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, what else? Isaiah, Psalms. There are lots of candidates, aren't there, for the greatest book, and we don't have to decide it. But the book of Exodus certainly is in anybody's list, isn't it? This is the master story of our people, and not only of our people. This is a book about redemption, about the bright light shining after periods of darkness. And this is the paradigm for Judaism, for Christianity, I take it for Islam as well. And if we think about the book of Exodus, what are its bones, so to speak? What are its essential pillars? It starts in darkness. There are deep problems for the community because of the concentration of power, which then treats human beings as instruments for its own betterment. And I always remember Immanuel Kant, one of Immanuel Kant's, the version of the categorical imperative is to treat other human beings as ends in themselves and not as means for one purpose or another. And this is the Enlightenment way, a rationalist's way of saying what Genesis chapter 1 said, that says that we are made in the image of God. And that suggests some ultimate value and not just or not even instrumental value. So that the book of Exodus opens with a denial of that proposition, that human beings are of value in themselves. And then God, through the leadership of Moses being a richly defined human being, really willing to lead the people, but reluctant throughout the process, and not only as an act of willfulness, but over and against the situation that he is facing. I mean, it's not hard to resist tyranny, and not hard to resist I might say, the vacillations of the human heart. And Moses, in his attempt to not accept God's demand that he lead the people, and we've looked at this on several occasions, he raises excellent points. Who am I? I'm not up for this task. Who are you? Who is calling me to do this? The people I'm being asked to lead vacillates and will quickly despair and want to return to Egypt. He doesn't go that far at this point, but he recognizes that human beings are not always willing to move ahead against the current. And then Moses finally says, look, I mean, even if I'm willing to do this, I'm not able to because I don't speak well. And God has responses to all of these things. But especially since this is a story with cosmic importance, that may be overstating it, this is a huge canvas on which the author is painting, and yet we get into the depths and the complexity of the human heart. So it's also a drama, a human drama, as well as a drama that is authored by the God of the universe, according to the Bible. So it works on two very different levels, not just a kind of mechanical working out of the problems of history, but also facing the vacillations of the human heart, which is nevertheless willing to move ahead, as the people finally do, making it to the promised land. And finally, after the plagues, which we're going to look at today, where the autocrat Pharaoh is finally defeated. I mean, one might think if I were writing this, I'd want to move right ahead to the splitting of the Red Sea and have the miracle. But the author, the editor, lingers quite a while in order to display 10 different plagues, the reluctance of power to concede, finally defeated. And then we have the two major impulses in biblical literature represented by the Red Sea and Mount Sinai. The saving voice, I'm just quoting Emil Fackenheim, whom I've alluded to over the years in his book, God's Presence in History, wonderful book. The saving voice at the Red Sea and the commanding voice at Mount Sinai. So we have God's salvational work in its most dramatic, but not the last, way in which it is exhibited. After all, the book of Isaiah, especially the so-called second Isaiah, is thinking about the exiles in Babylonia and uses this language, both of creation and of redemption, in understanding what's going to happen to the people in exile. In other words, these become paradigms, not only explanations of particular events, but paradigms for the future. In a way, the book of Exodus is structuring the nature of the historical process, and not just a drama in a particular period of time. God saves the Israelites at the Red Sea. Finally, they are redeemed. And you would think that they would celebrate for more than a couple of hours one evening. Because immediately they're facing impediments, and we've talked about this and we'll come back to it, impediments of the privations of nature. Nature does not always supply us with what we need. And the depredations of the historical process. Not everybody is our friend. And finally, the author digs down into the human heart, which a cosmic drama with human beings as some of the players. But it's not just human beings in action, it's what's going on internally in our hearts. And we know that the Israelites continually want to go back to Egypt. Much better to have cucumbers than the burdens of freedom. But finally they get to Mount Sinai in order to, I might say, reach one of the great climactic moments in biblical history. You may remember that Rashi, that great commentator, in his comment on the very beginning of the book of Genesis, asks, why does the Bible begin here and not with Exodus 12? Exodus 12 features the first commandments of the Torah. Well, not exactly. There are a couple of other things in Genesis. But Rashi's point is, if the Torah is really a book of laws, instructions for a community, why start with the stories of Genesis? And the reason I bring it up is that when we get to Mount Sinai, we've gotten to where Rashi thinks the whole Torah up to this point is leading. All the problems before Abraham is called demonstrates, we might say, that human beings untutored cannot really deal constructively with the challenges of life. And so God first calls Abraham, the heroic individual, and then God calls the people at Mount Sinai. So we have servitude, redemption, the saving voice at the Red Sea, the commanding voice at Mount Sinai, and then we come to a series of laws, not just the Ten Commandments, which some commentators see as topic sentences. Saadia Gaon, who is the first Jewish philosopher in the Middle Ages, thought that the Ten Commandments were topic sentences. I am the Lord your God. And then all the commandments that go under that category. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. All the commandments. So in a certain way, the Ten Commandments create the fundamental structure, but they're not enough to tell us how to operationalize those things. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Hey, great. Now I get it. But what am I supposed to do? Honor your father and mother. Love it. But how do I do that? And are there limits? Thou shalt not murder. The commandment is not thou shalt not kill, but thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not kill would be easy to follow. As some Eastern Asian sects do, they sweep the ground as they're walking to be sure not to kill any insects that may be in their path. That's an awfully difficult commandment to keep. Thou shalt not murder is easier in one sense. Murder is wrongful killing. There's a suggestion that there's legitimate killing, but don't do wrongful killing. The problem is we don't know what that is until we think about it. So that the Ten Commandments don't tell us how to fulfill the commandment. They're topics. So then after the Ten Commandments, we have a series of laws. And then we move to ritual. And as we see in chapter 12 of Exodus, that after the saving of the people and the plagues, we have the story of Passover, how to keep Passover. So ritual is represented in the book of Exodus, I wouldn't say consistently, as a way of remembering through activities the key moments in the history of a people. So that ritual also functions in the larger historical process, because memory, of course, is a vanishing capacity. I don't know about you, I'm experiencing it myself. And so ritual not only gives us a chance to be together and to celebrate, to observe, but it is also a way of keeping historical memory alive. So when you think of what is accomplished in the book of Exodus, it really is a remarkable array of concepts, of ideas, of values. And so it seems to me that this is a very excellent candidate for the most important book in the Bible. The prophets refer back to it all the time because it is paradigms. God is represented as a goel, a redeemer. The very notion of redeemer in the Bible is the acceptance of a responsibility to care for one's own, broadly understood. So Boaz in the book of Ruth is a redeemer because he cares about the well-being of the family of which he is something of a distant part and has an obligation to sustain that family. God is a redeemer in the sense of not just bringing the people out of bondage, but feeling the responsibility for one's own. God has made a covenant with the people, so that we also have this notion of covenant, which hovers over the book of Exodus with God. And then think about it. I mean, is there in biblical literature a freer, autonomous being than God? I mean, God is God and we're not. And God can do what God wants to do. And yet the Torah thinks about God in relationship with the people that he has called. And so God creates limitations on himself. I mean, that's the nature of relationship. If we're in relationship, what we can do is limited because of our sense of obligation to the one or to those with whom we have a relationship. And God, let me just put it in elegantly, ties himself up, bound to this people who are oftentimes compliant and oftentimes resistant. But God stays the course. This is one of the Bible's great themes, isn't it? That though we vacillate and go astray, God is going to be faithful. It may take 400 years, the number of years that the people are in bondage in Egypt, before God finally reappears. You remember at the end of chapter 2, God heard the groanings of the people and God decided to do something about it. So that's just a bit of free association, I might say, about the nature of the book of Exodus. Is there a book that, in the Bible that can compete with the book of Exodus? I mean, I think the book of Psalms may be a good example, which really probes the stirrings of the human heart, doesn't it? So it's approach to inwardness, which is a vast space, according to the book of Psalms. I mean, we are big internally. All you need to do is keep that in mind as you read through the Psalms as to the heights to which we can soar and the depths to which we can sink. It's no wonder that the tradition thought that King David was the author, one of the biggest people, so to speak, in the Bible. Okay, any thoughts, comments about this, Doris?
I'm thinking about the paradigm of a functioning family for the first time. From the get-go, the women, the mom, the daughter, protecting, being courageous.
Yeah. That's great.
Two brothers finally getting along. There's a glitch or two, but they're able to surmount the glitch.
As there are in families. So Doris's suggestion, welcome to live streamers, I'm trying to keep you in mind this morning. Doris suggests another way of thinking of the book of Exodus, and that is with the family as a paradigm. After all, the fourth of this, the fifth commandment, honor your father and mother. So that's the relationship that is featured in the Ten Commandments, just another way of indicating how important that unit is in biblical literature. I like it very much. Arthur?
I was really very deeply moved by your insight that in essence a relationship is limited, and I'm seeing a connection between that and the Goel. I don't know who taught me this, but I heard somewhere along the way that in some commentators view the most important mitzvahs, if you can rank them, it's like picking a favorite book, I guess, or movie. But some say it's the redemption of someone from captivity. That to be a Goel is the highest level of function. And I think, if you think about Boaz or other people who redeem, they limit themselves by taking on that role. So there's a connection between, if you're going to be
Say that again.
Deeply focused. So becoming focused is indeed limited, but it gives you greater power also.
Yeah. No, that's great. So Arthur is making the point about the Goel, who is a major figure and who either has an obligation imposed or imposes an obligation on him or herself. And think about the very notion of responsibility, which is built on the word response. So that responsibility, another way of describing responsibility is other-directed. You by becoming responsible, you recognize that in a certain way how you act is reaction to the one to whom you have devoted yourself as a responsible person. So that to take on a responsibility is, by definition, to limit yourself. To be willing to limit yourself. And I suppose one could say that some limitations turn out to be expansions. By committing yourself to a relationship, you're bigger. That's sort of a paradox. By limiting what I can do, I open myself up. You wonder whether God is feeling joyous that God has taken on so many responsibilities, and therefore in deep relationship with, if God is just self-enclosed, what is worth my time? Here's God sitting up in heaven. What is really worth my time? Really nothing. I'm just going to dwell in my onlyness, my uniqueness. And you wonder if God didn't say at some point, after all, God existed long before God created the world. Why did God create the world? I mean, the rabbis speculate a little bit about this. God was lonely. It's hard to be the only one in your category. And so God said, you know what? I'm going to take on the responsibility of the world and become bigger. I hope there's no lightning around. Steve?
Sort of picking up on Arthur's point, when you're talking about redemption, the rabbis say if you save a life, it's as if you saved the world.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's, it's a form of redemption, and it's also a form of a human relationship that really doesn't have much of a parallel or an equivalent. When you save someone's life, the person you saved has such a deep obligation to you as the redeemer. And also, your comments about the relationship between God and his people play equally well between Moses and the people.
Yeah.
Like Moses, upon accepting this commission somewhat unwillingly, still accepting it means that he's limited.
Yeah, that's very, very good. So Steve is pointing to God's self-limitation, and Moses, parallel to that, is self-limiting. You wonder whether or not Moses, no, I think the answer is no, actually. Did Moses reckon with the implications of finally taking on this role? Did he recognize exactly what he was in for?
No. He thought he was freeing a people. He didn't realize it was a 40-year commitment.
That is true. And yet, from Moses to Moses, none arose like Moses, which is really a statement about Maimonides. But it does point out that from Moses on Mount Sinai to Moses Maimonides, none arose like Moses Maimonides. Not the best citation for this point, but it occurred to me. And the end of Deuteronomy, which is a eulogy. None arose ever again like Moses. who spoke to Pharaoh face to face. Spoke to God face to face. Right. Good. Thanks. No, thanks. And I always wonder, because that statement is, there never again will arise. How did the author know this? Only because the author was not making an empirical statement. I mean, if this is an empirical statement, then the author doesn't know this. If it's a category statement, then it's plausible. What Moses did, bringing the Torah, leading the people for 40 years, will never again be replicated, the author is saying. So Moses, by taking on this, I mean, this is a paradox, isn't it? By taking on this burden, and it's a 40-year burden, Moses gets to be the guy who closes out the 5 books of Moses. And they're called the 5 books of Moses. My gosh. Jim?
Well, so Pharaoh's the antagonist in all this, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so the part where God hardens his heart to make this even more traumatic, you sort of have to wonder if God can direct Pharaoh's heart or his mind or his actions.
Yeah.
Why to this extreme? He could have, a lot of things could have been, the story wouldn't be the same.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he could have softened Pharaoh's heart and made the situation a little less difficult.
Right. So Jim is raising this very tough question about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, which God does. And then, Jim, you speculate, would it be better, easier, to soften his heart? Get Pharaoh to say yes. Why have Pharaoh say no? So here's my thought about it. I mean, we struggle with this notion of God hardening Pharaoh's heart. And by the way, earlier this morning I made a little list of who's the hardener. And there are 2 hardeners. God hardens Pharaoh's heart, and Pharaoh hardens his own heart. There are 20 iterations of this theme. The first 2 are God hardening Pharaoh's heart. And they're programmatic in the sense that this is what God has decided to do before the whole plague narrative unfolds. Then plagues 3 through 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The next 8 plagues are all products of Pharaoh hardening his own heart. Okay? So we can understand the obduracy of an individual. If Pharaoh's got a lot to lose, if he goes easy on the Israelites, we can understand why he toughens himself. Why is it, and it would be not so problematic if God's hardening Pharaoh's heart happened long after Pharaoh started hardening his own heart. Because if you think of hardening the heart as being involved in creating habits, and habits are hard to break, and one of the ways of poeticizing the difficulty of breaking a habit is to have God harden the heart. The problem is, before Pharaoh hardens his own heart in Plague 3, in the 3rd iteration, God has already said he's going to do it. So, to me, and I don't know what you'll think about this, there are really 2 great themes involved in the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. One is a way of dramatizing the redemption of the people and the difficulty of doing it over and against an oppressor. So liberation is drawn out and dramatized in the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. He's just not going to relent very easily. The other is that, and this is somewhat problematic, but I think this is what the Bible wants to do, to also focus on the greatness of God's power to do what God wants to do. And here what God wants to do is to free the people. So Pharaoh does say at the beginning, who is this God? So the question is, under whose auspices or control do the Israelites operate? The God of the universe, who is sole power, S-O-L-E, sole power. And so the hardening of the heart motif is a way of saying how difficult it is to get redemption, but redemption does come. But also that God needs at this point to display God's power. And if we get to chapter 10, let's just take a quick look at chapter 10. Chapter 10. So chapter 10, by my reckoning, is the 13th iteration of the plague narrative, 13 of 20. So chapter 10, then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart. Now that after Pharaoh starts hardening his own heart, God is just carrying out the implications of self-hardening. Right, there are two ways of God's hardening, understanding God's hardening the heart. It's a way of talking about habituated behavior. Pharaoh has hardened his heart, and God's hardening is just a way of working with what Pharaoh, in his autonomy, has done. The problem is, as I pointed out, the first two iterations, God is doing it. So that explanation doesn't fully work because I think there's a second theme. So chapter 10, then the Lord said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I've hardened his heart and the hearts of his courtiers, in order that I may display my signs, these my signs among them, and that you may recount in the hearing of your sons and your sons' sons how I made a mockery of the Egyptians and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am the Lord. So that this is not just about teaching the Egyptians a lesson, this is also a lesson for the Israelites, and I want to suggest that unless the people come to recognize this, the revelation of the laws on Mount Sinai has less potency. So it's Pharaoh who has to learn, but it's also the people. I mean, I just love that. The education imperative as well to establish the power of our obligation to the one who commands. Margie.
I want to bring out a different point on that, which goes back to Egyptian mythology, because hardening the heart was the key to the afterlife. If your heart, and I think the word they use, vayikabe, to make his heart heavy.
Yeah.
So if your heart was heavy, and its weight on the scale of justice was ma'at, the goddess of justice, you don't get in the afterlife. So he was really screwing himself in a way for the afterlife. But I wanted to ask you, because someone pointed this out to me, that there's 3 different Hebrew words used for hardening the heart.
Yeah.
I sent this to you a long time ago, I think. Vayikazeh, well, the first one was vayikashet, to harden the heart. Vayikazeh, to strengthen the heart. And the third one was vayikabe, to make the heart heavy.
Right.
And that's the one that is really, in some way, reflecting Egyptian mythology. The idea that your heart, because they thought to see the intelligence,
Yep. No, the heart is even in biblical psychology, the heart, the seat of the various capacities, heart, mind, and will. So Margie's making the point that that this narrative, like so many narratives, is situated in terms of its origin in the larger culture of the ancient Near East. That in a certain way, the author might have, it's probable, some understanding of this issue from which the biblical author borrowed. I mean, the two greatest examples of this are the creation story, the Tehom in Genesis chapter 1, the void, the formlessness and void, is very close to the goddess Tiamat, who is the goddess of the sea in the Babylonian creation story. The Noah story is very much like the story of Utnapishtim, who is also facing a flood. But what's interesting about this is that even though there's a context for some of these stories, that we do recognize that these stories in their origin are situated in a larger cultural context. But the author is always manipulating this material for the author's own purpose, so that in the Gilgamesh epic, the whole flood story and the search is for immortality. That's what the hero wants to find. In the Noah story, immortality is not an issue at all. Noah is a righteous person. So the author has taken the author's source and not been a slave to it, not brought it forward as it is articulated in the ancient world, but turning it to his own purpose. And I would say that this story that you're pointing out is the same, because if, as you've said, that the heart is the seat of the possibility of immortality. But the notion of immortality does not appear in these narratives in Exodus at all. The author is not interested in immortality. The author is interested in good and evil, and the way in which the human heart can reach high or sink low. So it's another example. The creation story is not a passive importation of an earlier story. It's the material for which the author then manipulates it for the author's own purposes. And this may be the case too, because the Bible is probably, in a thoroughgoing way, uninterested in the idea of life after death. Or I might put it in spatial terms. There are two kinds of immortality. There's vertical immortality and horizontal immortality. Vertical immortality, just as a metaphor here, for the immortality of the soul. Do I live on? Horizontal immortality is the persistence of an historical process. The Bible is interested in immortality, but it's the immortality of the people in history, and not something transhistorical. The very last word of the Hebrew Scriptures at the end of 2 Chronicles is Vaya'al, which comes from the root ayin lamed hey, from which we get aliyah. So Vaya'al means King Cyrus in Babylonia, who the Persian king who defeated the Babylonians and had a different view of how to deal with captive peoples, said you can go back to the land of Israel as long as you serve as a buffer between the Persian Empire and the Egyptian Empire. That's what Cyrus had in mind. It wasn't largesse, it was realpolitik. But so what does it mean for the end of a book? All books have to end. Is the end the end? No. When it says vayal, it just means, all right, they're on their way back. History continues. We're not jumping out of the historical process. We're continuing it. That's the immortality that the Bible, I think, is interested in. It's the rabbis who introduced, through some borrowing, of the notion of life after death. Okay, but I like in chapter 10 especially that it's also the people who have to learn that God is the God of the universe and is able to do these things. And therefore becomes, if I could say it this way, the legitimate commander of mitzvot. I brought you out, the introduction to the Ten Commandments, I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Somebody says you have to do X, I might say, well, who are you to tell me I should do something? I'm the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt, folks. And therefore, I have a right to command, to offer, to create responsibilities for you. In a way, that's part of the power of this story, which whose culminating moment is chapter 20. The God who redeemed us has a right to command us. Diane?
So your initial question of who is the hardener, who hardens whose heart?
Yes.
And it goes back and forth. So there's this complementarity between God's behavior and Pharaoh's behavior and et cetera. Made me think of the passage in Nitzavim. How do we experience redemption? And the word shuv, to shuvah, to return, goes back and forth and back and forth. So we take a certain action, God helps us with what we're trying to do. Take another action, God helps us with what we're trying to do. So there's this, the loneliness of God, I think, is a bit undercut by the notion that there is such a strong connection with God's partner, who is us, as we figure out how we're going to live in this world. And I think both of this passage does that in a negative sort of way, and Nitzavim does it in a positive sort of way.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So let me see if I can try to summarize what you've said. Your main idea is complementarity, that really there are two entities involved, both here in the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. It's both God's action and our action, and God responding, and and then back to Nitzavim, which we read on Yom Kippur at the end of Deuteronomy, about we're called to repent, and God is going to help us do it. And that's covenant without the name, isn't it? It's the operationalizing of covenant in the sense of mutual obligation, mutual claim on the other. And Diane, you also made the point here about God's loneliness. Not speculation, the Torah never says God was lonely, but you can imagine, if I don't have contact with anybody for 2 days, I'm going crazy. How about infinite time before God decided to create the universe? I think this kind of idea is both fun but also legitimized by the Bible, because the Bible thinks of God as being invested and involved in what's going on around him. And therefore you might think, God really wants to be involved. And this involvement creates joy for God, we might want to say. I don't know. Michael?
So I can't help but go back to your initial question, which is which book in the Bible is the most important?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, I think you're implying that there's two ways to look at that question. One of them is, which book tells us the most about us?
Mhm.
And the other one is, which book tells us the most about God?
Wow.
And when you say that God is teaching the Israelites,
Yeah.
it's not a matter of just teaching the Egyptians, it's also teaching the Israelites how to think about God, how God operates. Right? And I can't help, of course, but think about Job, because I always think about Job. And because I think that book has a lot more to say about God than it does about us.
Mm.
But, you know, this is, to me, it's a lot easier to understand who we are from the Bible than it is to understand God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
God is not meant to be understood exactly, right? So, I think that's part of the awe, is that we can't really understand. So, anyway, that's all I want to say.
Does that lead you to so for you, Job is a candidate for the?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just.
You're musing a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, is God is definitely not fully hidden in the Bible. And so in this sense, in principle, before we start talking about it, that God is in some sense knowable. You know, somewhere in the story of Samuel and David, it says God's ways are not our ways. So that's an extreme example of the claim that God is inscrutable. But God just, I mean, how do we know each other? Who are you? Jim? Who are you? Let me, by your actions, by how you behave in the empirical realm. The Bible is replete with God's actions. So can we make an inference from action to essence? No, because there are parts of us that are hidden. But certainly, if we know each other through our actions, then God's actions are everywhere manifest. So we certainly understand God with limits. And the Torah is oftentimes will say that. But nevertheless, God is not inscrutable. Isn't that true? God displays God's hand all the time. Okay. Yes, please tell me your name.
Nancy Gabhart.
Hi, Nancy.
I am Stephen Hart's sister-in-law.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is Stephen's brother.
From Chicago. Oh, from Detroit.
So it occurs to me that there's another group or another entity that's got hardened hearts. And we're not told, at least I don't remember if there is a place where we're told who hardens their hearts, but it's the Israelites.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The Israelites, they are hesitant to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Once they leave, they're fetching. You know, I'd rather go back and have the cucumbers, as you said,
Yeah.
than suffer out here in the desert. And then we get to the edge of the promised land, and only 2 of the tribes find any value, if you will, any hope in the promised land. The others come back and they're afraid. They don't want change. So my sense is that we have lesson may be that we as Jews, as current day Israelites, have the dilemma of how to keep our hearts unhardened and how to develop a relationship with God in the here and now, or with our own turmoil, our own
Yeah.
anxieties.
Wow. I've already forgotten your name.
Nancy Gafford.
Nancy. So Nancy is, I just love the question. Whose heart? When I came in here this morning, if you had said to me, by the way, whose heart is being hardened in this story? I would have said Pharaoh's heart. Who else? The Egyptians. Who else? Nobody else. They're the bad guys. Nancy is suggesting, if I'm reading you correctly, is that the Israelites also have hardened hearts and are resisting. And as you point out, only a couple of people make it into the promised land from the Exodus generation. We read in the book of Numbers a couple of times that the Israelites want to go back to Egypt for freedom. We were free there. So I like this because it does not, how to say this? It doesn't harden the distinction. Let me put it differently. You know, there's the idea of Manichaeism. Mani was a prophet in the early centuries of the Common Era who was a dualist. When we talk about Manichaean, we talk about rigid distinctions between light and darkness, good and bad. And we might very well apply a Manichaean grid to this story. The Israelites are the good guys, and the Egyptians are the bad guys. And it's as clear as day, but you're problematizing that dualism because there's something of a continuum, as you're contending, between the Egyptians, Pharaoh, and the Israelites, who also are resisting what God has intended to take the people to the promised land. I mean, from the very beginning, God promised Abraham that I will give you this land. And you remember the story where Abraham goes to sleep and God prophesizes, and you'll be a slave to Egypt for your people for 400 years, and then I will bring you out and take you into the land. Hey, great. My gosh. Then when it gets down to it, the people are as regressive. They want to go back. The known is much more pleasing than the unknown. And even though we're called to an adventure, we don't want to do it. So I like that. So that here's what I want to say about it. The author has a very capacious understanding of the complexity of the human condition. This is not just, these aren't straw figures. We are also, in a certain sense, we too are Egyptians in that how to say it, structural sense. That's the point you were making. Yeah. Wow. I'm always asking myself, what kind of author, what sort of vision does it take to write these stories? Not just biblical stories, or these poems, that just get so deep into the complexity of the human condition and talk about the complexity in very, very picturesque, poignant language. Joe.
At the risk of being political, perhaps Netanyahu's heart is hardened, as are the leaders of Hamas, and where's Joshua and Caleb in this story?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'm inclined both to agree with you and to fight back a little bit. There are enemies. I'm not excusing it, but I think there is a complexity to the story. The biblical story tends to be a bit schematic. That is, clear ideas. And this idea, well, that Nancy just pointed out here, that the clear categories become murky. And don't they hear?
But, you know, when your heart's hardened, it doesn't make the other person right. In other words, what it does is it just says, when you continue to expose yourself to this, you almost don't control your anger. You almost don't control your own emotions and to go back.
Yeah.
So it's not that he's bad because his heart is hardened. It's that it's this process of life and exposure and that hardens you. And you really have to fight it. You have to be like Joshua and Caleb and see beyond what the immediate in order to sort of break through and find a solution. Isn't that what we want, is people who will stick with the solution?
Yep, no.
As opposed to blaming, because you have to defend yourself. I'm not defending.
Yep, no, I think that's an important point. Joe, among the points that Joe's making here is that rather than just having this is my reframing, your eyes on the ground, what's going on in front of you, to also have some vision about what the future can look like and understand the present in some way in terms of the vision that you'd like to see materialize. Yeah, no, I like that comment. Chad?
I'm always interested in thinking about biblical authors. And one way to do that is to look at phraseology that is kind of unique.
Yeah.
And when you look at the plagues, so the prophet that has the most plague imagery is Ezekiel.
As what?
Ezekiel uses blood, pestilence, other things, but one in particular.
You're talking about the prophet Ezekiel.
Ezekiel.
Okay, all right.
And one in particular that he uses in Ezekiel 22 is that he's going to pour hailstones with sulfurous fire on the people as punishment. And the hail plague is not only hail, but if you read it, it's thunder and hail and fire streamed upon the ground and rained hail upon Egypt, with fire flashing in the midst of the hail. And the only other place that imagery is used that I know of is Sodom and Gomorrah.
Uh-huh.
I was just thinking about if you're interested in who might be an author of the plague story, Ezekiel would be somebody that
Oh.
I would think about.
Oh, that's interesting. So Chad is making the point here that since Ezekiel has language very similar to the plagues narrative or Sodom and Gomorrah, that Ezekiel becomes, to that degree, however strong it is, a possible author of these stories. Right. Well, but it's an interesting stretch. I mean, Spinoza, for example, in his great critique of the Bible, I mean, what Spinoza is trying to show is that the Bible cannot be the product of revelation. He's trying to undermine the authority of the clerics by undermining the basis of their authority, and that is the Bible. And when Spinoza says that Moses could not have been the author, he then speculates about who might be the author, and his candidate is Ezra, who brought the people back from Babylonia and may have been very instrumental in canonizing the 5 books of Moses. So there are speculations about who might have done it. And Spinoza has some very telling arguments about the problem of attributing the 5 books of Moses to Moses. Interesting. We do know that, and I marked it down, there are a couple of other places that talk about the 10 plagues. I have it here somewhere, but I can't find it. Oh, here it is. Psalm 78 and Psalm 105 also talk about the plagues, but as Sarna points out, the order, the number are different in each of these iterations, which suggests not a common understanding of the plagues, but different understanding, while also acknowledging the centrality of the plagues as a phenomenon in the story. Yeah, Steve?
One thing that is coming forward for me is Pharaoh's indifference to the Egyptians, in that they suffer tremendously
Yeah,
with all of these plagues.
yeah,
And Pharaoh, we know that there were pharaohs that were overthrown.
yeah,
And interestingly enough, one of the reasons why the original Pharaoh enslaved the Hebrews was, if an enemy attacks us, they will join our enemies. And as the plagues continue, you could speculate that the Pharaoh, in his initial indifference, he's getting messages to say, the people are not going to support you if an enemy attacks, because you are so indifferent to their suffering. Your acts could relieve their suffering, and you are choosing not to.
And what point are you making here?
Well, Pharaoh's motivation, not only is he taken down a peg by this God of the universe, but he may have more realpolitik concerns that the crown may not be his if an enemy attacks and the people say, go ahead, we hate this guy.
Oh, I see. So you're making the point here that his motivations may be multiple.
Right.
Yeah. That's an interesting point, as you use the notion of realpolitik. He's interested in survival and wants to kind of fend off the assaults on his reign. And therefore, if the Israelites are not in any way loyal, they're a potential resource for the enemy. Why not be a little easier on the Israelites, and that problem will diminish?
Or it's all the Egyptians. You've got a restive population. It's like, Pharaoh, you could change our situation
Yeah,
by giving in,
yeah.
and you're so indifferent to our plight.
Mm, mm, mm.
You want somebody new to do this.
Right, so that but both the Israelites and the Egyptians themselves are being oppressed by Pharaoh.
The Egyptians are oppressed.
And from your comment, I draw the inference, I'll say it and then I'll think about it, that Pharaoh becomes a kind of one-dimensional figure. He's got his motivations, but is he that tone deaf to how he might make it easier on himself? In a way, Pharaoh becomes a figure against whom the God of the universe can react, power against power, and make a very clear comment about who should be in charge. It's sort of Manichaean. The good guys are totally good, and the bad guys are just totally bad. So we have a very clear distinction.
He's addicted to power.
Yeah? Power corrupts. Yes?
I want to go back to your point. My mind was wondering a little bit about the loneliness of God.
Yeah.
And before he created the universe, he was all alone. He wanted to create mankind so he wouldn't be so lonely.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he create a mate for himself? So he had a co-ruler, a woman, who would be with him, that he could commiserate with in terms of the decisions. And there's nothing, I've always thought of God as a male, as I've grown up. Behind every successful male is a woman. Behind him.
Amen.
Talk about prayer.
Is there any mention, of a female?
No.
Or the sexuality of male and female of a God?
So let's imagine ourselves up there in heaven with God. And God is feeling lonely. And God speculates, maybe I should make a companion. So then God says, well, wait a minute, there's a dilemma here. Do I want to solve my loneliness problem and create polytheism? Boy, I am very lonely. But you know what? My decision, there's a lot at stake here. Yeah, I think I'm going to get a wife. Well, there you go. Another polytheistic entity, and we could throw the book away. And so, isn't it true, though? If God had a consort, then you would be talking about two divine beings. So thank God, God decided not to go that direction. How do I know? Yeah, but it's hard to be the only one in your category. What if I were the only rabbi in the world and I had the whole world as a responsibility? I would say, okay, let's have some other rabbis. I'd be reluctant. But God is totally responsible for the whole thing. Oh my gosh. I love that. Lynn?
Going back to hardening the hearts, and God hardened the Pharaoh's heart, but maybe he didn't, he hardened it by the action that God took.
Mhm.
The plagues got worse.
Yes.
So Pharaoh's heart had to get hardened to refuse to obey.
Yes.
So it might be a cause and effect rather than something mystical or something that God hardened the Pharaoh's heart. The hardening of the Pharaoh's heart occurred because the plagues got worse and Pharaoh had himself to harden his heart to allow it
To allow what?
agree to let them go.
Pharaoh had to harden his heart to allow what?
I'm saying maybe the plagues were the cause of his hardening. God had control of his hardening because he made the plagues much more extreme and difficult as they went by.
Yeah.
So the fact that God was hardening the heart was Pharaoh's reaction to what God was doing. Am I making myself?
God is the primary hardener.
No, God is taking plagues and making them worse.
Yes.
As they go along.
Right.
The worsening plagues make Pharaoh
React.
have to harden his heart to
Mhm.
refuse to let the
And what you're saying is that God is the primary cause and Pharaoh is reacting to God's prior action.
No.
No?
I don't know.
No?
Well, maybe. I'm just saying that God hardened Pharaoh's heart
Yes.
by sending these plagues that are worse one after another.
Right.
And for Pharaoh to refuse to let the people go after each plague, the fact that he had to be resistant and did that was hardening his heart.
And what's the implication of what you're saying? That Pharaoh is less culpable?
No, God is probably more culpable.
Okay.
Because he sent these plagues, and His heart was hardening because he was resisting these terrible things that were happening to the Egyptians.
Right, and as I pointed out, there are really two narratives going on here. One is God hardening Pharaoh's heart in order to display God's power and therefore ultimately God's right to command. But there's also Pharaoh hardening his own heart as an independent cause. And I think what you're saying, if I understand what you're saying, Lynn, is that of these two causes, God and Pharaoh, that in a certain sense, God as a causal agent is more important in this story because Pharaoh's is a reaction to what God has done.
I'm saying Pharaoh is a reaction to what God has done.
Right.
But Pharaoh has to harden his own heart because of what's given to him.
That's right. I mean, Pharaoh is a cause of the hardening, but if God hadn't, now I'm drawing something you may not be intending, if God hadn't done some hardening at the beginning, maybe Pharaoh would not have needed to harden his own heart. Malcolm?
I want to step back from action versus reaction just for a second, just to think about the notion of hardening. To me, I don't know if this relates to Hebrew, but it's to make something impervious. And we necessarily, by doing that,
Doing what?
making something impervious.
Okay. As another way of talking about hardening?
Yes.
Okay.
We shield, or we ignore.
Yes.
Or we blind ourselves
Okay.
to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether, irrespective of who's doing it and what the motive is, it's a characteristic of human nature.
To ignore,
We have that capacity, whether we choose to use it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's willful blindness.
Okay. Uh-huh.
And it results in certain activities, whether it's a good result or a bad result.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the story in some regards illustrates whether it's the Israelites or whether it's Pharaoh, whether it's God's action, it's just a behavior that is illustrated here and propels the story to a particular outcome.
Yeah. So Malcolm, I mean, so what we've seen here this morning is different ways of understanding this story, different emphases. You're emphasizing the psychological, that there may be some benefit to those of us who willfully close our hearts because to acknowledge other things going on may be hard for us or problematic for us. I mean, Steve's point about Pharaoh seemed to be blind to other ways of doing this, of being kinder to the Israelites or to his own people, and it may not have eventuated in that catastrophe. So it's just, I think, another illustration of the many threads of this. You see what I'm saying here? Many ways of understanding it. One can understand it cosmically, or realpolitik, or the perversions of the human heart, of which the Israelites are not exempt. Scott?
So, this is maybe an extension of that idea. If God's role is a redeemer, I want to ask a question. Does mercy fit into that? Does his mercy fit into being a redeemer? Is that a quality of being a redeemer? It's showing mercy.
Yeah.
I've heard it described that the plagues are actually two plagues, right? Because he instituted them and then he removed them.
Uh-huh.
So in that sense, his mercy, his removal of the plague, it even says when Pharaoh saw that this had subsided, his heart hardened. He steadied his heart himself. So with God's second action, the merciful action, that caused the hardening, in a sense, in an indirect way, in that psychological way that you just described.
when God, I want to be sure I understand what you're saying. When God ended a plague,
Yes.
that was an act of mercy.
Verse 5 say that.
Okay, okay. And that's an act of mercy toward the Egyptians.
Right.
Okay.
Which resulted in Pharaoh saying, hey, I got this now. I've got the same.
I see what it emboldened Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Now, right. And what's at stake here? I mean,
Oh, I know.
is it?
I don't-
God is also merciful.
Yeah, right. Right. And that maybe intentionally backfired. He's aware that was going to happen. That's why he said, I'm going to sniff at his heart. And that extends what he said, that by creating, in this case, I'm saying by removing the plague,
Yes.
he stiffened Pharaoh's heart.
He emboldened Pharaoh by stopping a plague. Okay. And that it's tantamount to the hardening of the heart again. Pharaoh is able to then go on. Okay, so Scott, is your main point here that we're learning something about God, that God is not just absolutely or rigidly anti-Egyptian. He's trying to give them another chance.
In a sense, yeah.
Okay. What God could have done is just one big plague.
Right.
And that's,
And had he not removed it, perhaps that would have been enough to
okay.
for Pharaoh to say, okay, all right, uncle.
So the plagues, among other things, are an educational device to see if Pharaoh will come to his senses. I'll do plague 1, but I've got plague 2 in my pocket. Let's see if they change their minds. And that didn't harden the heart. They go on with it. So God's mercy extended also to the Egyptians. Let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, it just reminds me of what happens, gosh, in Deuteronomy. Can't remember exactly where. The Egyptians are also your neighbors. They were hospitable. I think that's what the Torah says. They were hospitable to you. Right. So that's a way of softening. Yours is a kind of an attempt to soften down the story a little bit, or at least in terms of God. That God is all not just bent on vengeance and justice. I like it. Let me, Doris.
Well, I'll tell you something that helps me with the story. There are criteria established about validating the authenticity of an event or something that God or Jesus in the New Testament says. Criterion number 1 is multiple attestation. It's repeated over and over in all of the books, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
In 5 of the books, in the prophets, in the wisdom literature, in the Psalms, et cetera, et cetera. So here's something that is repeated over and over again. Be kind to your neighbor, be kind to the alien, be hospitable to the foreigner.
Yeah.
You yourself were these over and over. It's all over the place. Must have been said. That authenticates it. Second criterion, these are John Mayer's criteria.
Okay.
The criterion of embarrassment. Wow, this is an embarrassing thing. That validates it. God said, I will harden somebody's heart.
Yeah.
That's so, what? God would never say that.
How could God say that?
Well, not only does God say it, he says it many times.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to keep it in the scriptures. We're not going to eliminate it.
Yeah.
We're not going to say God didn't say it. God said it.
Yeah.
What does it mean it doesn't fit?
Okay.
Well, live with it. You don't understand it. But God did it. and we could talk about it until the end of time. We don't get it. But the fact that we keep something that's embarrassing about the family, about God, I don't understand why God would say this. Well, but God is God, and you don't understand everything that God does.
Yeah, that's a good
And you
point.
have to just accept that.
So Doris's point here, I think, is on what grounds do we accept a claim as authentic? I don't know. An author has a little story about Isaac or about Rebecca. Am I to take that seriously, really? It's just said once. But what is said over and over again, and criterion 2, if we're embarrassed about it, but it's still there, those 2 criteria mean this is for real. And you may not like it. And that's why we say it over and over again, because you're probably not going to like it.
Or understand it.
Or, well, that's the next thing. Yeah, you may not like it, but I'm telling you, because I've said it over again, I'm embarrassed about it myself, the author is saying. But I need to drive home a point. And therefore, as difficult as this is, it's real. And deal with it. And one of the ways of dealing with it, honestly, is to recognize I can't get to the bottom of it. Finally, it's just a matter of faith. God forbid. Blind faith. That this is right. God does these things, and I'll be darned if I can understand it. I just have to accept it. Joe?
We find in the Midrash, right after the splitting of the sea, that the angels are celebrating the drowning of the Egyptians, and God reprimands the angels and said, the Egyptians are my people too. And of course, later on, God tells us not to abhor an Egyptian. So think about God, where God is. I think we fail to separate out the Egyptians from the Pharaoh. So God's working on Pharaoh, but the Egyptians are simply, they're his people too, right? Because he's accepting them as his people too, and then they're obviously get the brunt of what's happening. So what is it about political leadership and what you have to do to political leadership? Are the Egyptians bad? Was the taskmaster who Moses had to kill bad? Is it Pharaoh? And what's this political dynamic when we have enemies or people that are pressing us on the other side? And we can look at modern history and say, what was the role of the people? What was the role of the leader? And what happened? So I just think it's a more complicated picture when you don't confound the Egyptians with the Pharaoh straight out.
So that's an interesting point. So I think Joe's point is counter to Doris's, because Doris's point here is at some point we just have to accept that this is true. This is a reality. Pharaoh hardens hearts of everybody. Now, Joe's point is, the Midrash is unwilling to accept it. The Midrash is going to say, now wait a minute. God is not that hard-hearted. And if we think that all the Egyptians are evil, we'd better think twice about that, because that would be so embarrassing an acknowledgement that I can't believe that God is saying all these people are hateful, all of them. I can see Pharaoh hardening, dealing with it, but can all the Egyptians? I'm going to press your point here. Well, I think, Doris, you would say, hey, wait a minute now. This is really hard to swallow, but it's said over and over again, and therefore the author must mean it. The Midrash is embarrassed about it and does something about it and softens down the issue.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay.
That's the job of the Midrash.
That's the job of the
And
mid.
that's the reason we've spent all this time on it today, because we want to find a way to understand it. So the Midrash comes in and says, I've got a way to deal with this.
Yeah, that's true.
That's fair.
It's
Totally fair. But I love the idea,
Uh-huh.
and this is well established by biblical scholars,
Yes.
that you could have something embarrassing in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And just admit it.
Yeah.
And that sort of helps the credibility of the whole book, actually.
I like that. In a certain way, I'm going to go for it here. Your claim is more heroic than Joe's. Your claim is, hey, this is real, folks. And we can't soften it down. We may want to soften it down. We don't like the implications. But the Torah is one of those books that is, what's the way of saying this? It's sui generis. It's itself, and it's not trying to be something else. The Midrash is trying to make the Torah into something else, where the Egyptians really are, in a certain sense, the good guys as well. And I think you make a good point. Okay, that's part of the Midrash's job. I mean, you wonder whether.
And the issue then to Joe is, and to answer you,
Yes.
Roger, is does that really solve the problem of God actually saying this?
Or to put it differently, does that really, by softening the rough edges, does it violate something about reality? Is the Bible here too much reality for us? And therefore, we have to find a way to domesticate it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I mean,
I think we do that.
you wonder about who's the greatest warrior in ancient Greece? Achilles. The whole Iliad is about the anger of Achilles, who sulks in his tent while all of his comrades are being killed, until his good friend Patroclus is being dragged around the city by Hector, and he just springs into action. I mean, oh my gosh, this great hero acts this way? Let's have a little midrash on Achilles. Really, he ate something that didn't agree with him. The thing I like about the point you're making is that it's willing to go to a place that we're uncomfortable with, that still may be a part of reality. And we look to these singular pieces of literature to tell us this. We don't need another fable. The Midrash, I'm just going for it here. The Midrash is a fable. Oh, thank God. The Egyptians are really, these are my neighbors. Wow, I didn't see that.
Are there not 10 righteous Egyptians? Abraham would have argued with God.
Oh, that's an interesting point. No, he wouldn't have. David?
I think that the description of Pharaoh's heart being hardened is a reality. If you look at history of the behavior of tyrants over the ages, what Pharaoh does is typical of the way tyrants behave, which is that as time goes on, when they feel threatened, they respond more and more harshly. And so it's as if either they are hardening their own hearts or God is hardening them. So I think the text in describing the way Pharaoh behaves is reflecting the reality that we're going to see.
Yeah.
But I don't like your description of the Midrash as being a fable.
Soft, yeah.
Because the point of the Midrash is not to excuse this phenomenon, but instead to address the issue of how we should behave in the face of this phenomenon. In other words, we see a tyrant behaving badly. How should that affect our attitude towards the people who the tyrant rules over? I read an interesting commentary recently about how we should feel about, are the Germans bad people? And,
Oh, I saw that too, yeah.
and yeah, so this the writer says that when he was 8 years old, he believed that the reason why the Holocaust happened was because the Germans were bad people. And now he has a different attitude as he looks at the behavior of people around us today.
Yeah, right.
And so one of the things that the Midrash teaches us is that every individual has the possibility of being righteous or not righteous.
Yeah. So, okay, so David is making a very good point. The Midrash is not, as I flippantly called it, a fable, but it really has work to do.
Yes.
And the work is to tell us how to behave. But my reaction is, I mean, I love the point you're making. I just wonder, though, if it gets to what's going on here. I think that the text and the Midrash are very different genres. Let me put it this way. So let me just go for it here. The text is telling us the truth. The Midrash is telling us, in spite of the truth, try to be moral about this. And I don't think that this text, I want to say, the great texts, the texts that are indispensable, are telling us the truth. There may be moral implications. I mean, the text about, Homer's a Greek, and Hector is the hero. Whoa, wait a minute. My guy's a hero. Doesn't mean that it's your guy. Your guy is, so I'm thinking of other things too. I don't know. Plato tells us that his hero is really dangerous for society. And you got to watch out for him, although he's my hero. So I think the text, this is what I like about Doris's point here, the text is getting to some layer of reality that is hard to get to because we don't like it. Whereas we have to operate in this world, and the truth is sometimes very hard to not only bear, but to replicate. We have to be good people.
But when you say the text is the truth,
Yes.
that's a simplistic description of what's going on, because we're seeing tyranny, and the question that we individuals have to face is, how do we judge other people in the face of this?
Yes.
So do we hold all of the Egyptians responsible, or don't we? And the text itself is trying to tell us the answer, because after all, over and over again, we talk about how we're supposed to treat the stranger. Well, who is the stranger? It may be one of the Egyptians.
Yeah.
So the Midrash is trying to enlighten us as to how to understand the difficult details. Yes, it's true that Pharaoh is a tyrant and that the people of Egypt hold responsibility for what happened. But the Midrash is telling us there's nuance in that. You don't just decide that all the people are bad.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
I guess, I mean, yeah. I like the idea of a text telling us something that is very hard to bear, as if the harder to bear, the truer it might be. I know that's not a great inference. Yeah. Well, the Midrash domesticates the text. In a good sense. Lynn?
It's a lot in my head right now after
I'll
listening
say.
to everybody. I don't like ambiguity. Pharaoh was already hardened by the way he treated the Jews when they were enslaved in bondage. The Egyptians who followed Pharaoh's orders were just as bad as Pharaoh. However, maybe the other population wasn't, and let's assume that they weren't.
Right.
So there was good and there was bad, and one of the gentlemen said something that I totally agree with too. But so I'm still going back to my thought
Uh-huh.
is that we don't like to hear that God hardened the Pharaoh's heart, but he didn't indirectly do it. He didn't put anything over the Pharaoh that changed his heart. The Pharaoh's heart became hardened because of what God had delivered to him
Sure.
to try to change his mind.
Right.
I know this might be simplistic.
Well.
We can accept that, I would think, in our own hearts.
Yeah.
Because God first started out with more of a minor, and as far as stopping the plagues, if that plague wasn't working anymore, he stopped it, not because he was being merciful, he stopped it because it wasn't working. Maybe I'm just oversimplifying.
Well, the point of your idea is that the Egyptians aren't as culpable as we might make them out to be. That really they're reacting to some prior impulse. By the way, I found the passage of this is in Deuteronomy 23. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your kinsman. Edom, right, is Esau. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you are a stranger in his land. So that's pre-midrashic, isn't it? It's trying to do what the midrash does. I'm going to stay with my point idea one more time. What do you mean I shouldn't abhor the Egyptians? What makes you think I am abhorring them? That you tell me I shouldn't do it? Because they were culpable. But don't take it to heart. You agree with that, right? That the Egyptians themselves were deeply culpable.
I don't like to make collective statements about
Okay. Well, why does it say don't abhor an Egyptian? Why would it say that?
Because you don't abhor a person because of the fact that he's an Egyptian. You decide about a person on the basis of that person.
Okay.
We don't abhor all Germans. And if you look at Germans today,
Yeah.
Germans behaved a lot better than a lot of other people
Oh, sure. Of course.
after the war.
So don't abhor an Egyptian applies to two different entities. The Egyptians who are abhorrent, but not to all Egyptians.
Right.
Okay. Should we turn to the text? Wow. I often think almost 2 hours of discussion on no text at all. Not true, of course. I'm exaggerating. Yes, wow. Lou.
Well, I'd like to go back to the text.
How dare you?
So in chapter 1, line, let's say 19, talks about the midwife. Pharaoh said death to all the Jews, newborn Jews. And in line 19, it says the midwife comes up, it's not working. And why isn't it working? Because, the Egyptians are not obeying what Pharaoh has to say. Because,
They resist.
I mean, you could, if you want to keep track of a newborn, a pregnant woman looks like a pregnant woman. So it wouldn't be a big deal to figure out, we should keep track of Deborah because she's pregnant and she's going to give birth, and then we have to kill the child. So it says in 19, in that section, it says that it's not working because the reason it's not working because the midwives aren't doing what they were told to do.
Yeah,
So you go to chapter 12, and they declare we're going to kill all the firstborn. God says all the firstborn Egyptians are going to be put to death.
Right.
Nowhere in the text it says that there were Jews that saying to their Egyptian neighbors, come into my house, the pregnant women or the firstborn, come into my house, you'll be safe in my house. No, they get killed.
Okay.
So the Jews seem to be wanting in terms of morality because they're not doing anything to preserve the lives of Egyptians, where the Egyptians did something to preserve the lives of Jews. So particularly the daughter of Pharaoh, she was, number one. I mean, so, what are we to conclude?
Well, look, I mean, an author is not responsible to talk about everything. The author is following a certain thread.
Well, this is a big deal. Life and death is a big deal.
Well, look,
that's like,
it's true.
I mean, I don't think there's any bigger deal than that. I mean, we, Jews, modern day Jews, we have, the halls of righteousness.
But Lou, that's the theme of this book, of this story, is not the morality of the Jews. It's the morality of the Egyptians. Now, I might say to the author, well, why don't you add something about the Jews' responsibility, Hebrews' responsibility here? And he would say,
This is not a
there's a wonderful book, you may probably know it, by Frank Kermode called The Genesis of Secrecy, which is about the Gospel of Mark. And Kermode makes a very interesting point. Narrative begets more narrative. There is always more to say if you want to talk about the implications of a particular story. So we're talking about the morality of the Egyptians, and Lou's point is, well, what about the morality of the Israelites? You can always say it, but if the author says everything, covers all the bases, the storyline doesn't move forward. I mean, the author is making he's forgetting a variety of things, of necessity.
That's a nasty attitude.
It's a nasty attitude?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so in what sense?
I mean, in the sense that you're talking about people's lives.
I get it.
And to be flippant that way, and people say, oh, the Bible is very particular, everything's very particular, there's nothing in excess, nothing, everything is very, is there for purpose and all that.
Yeah.
And story about the midwives, you know, if it wasn't, you know, if it's not being there, be reflected with people being, surviving or dying. That's a big deal.
What I'm calling narrative logic, you're calling blind spots. And I think, okay, I mean, it's true, that isn't talked about, but
I
you
mean-
could say of any author, why didn't you talk about X? So I think it's a little unfair, but I get your point.
I mean, the rabbis, what do you call it? You know, they
Can't put the fire
they
out.
recognize this here because they, in traditional Jewish
Okay.
societies, the firstborn are supposed to fast on the day before Passover.
I think we need to harden the heart.
All right.
So they recognize that.
Didn't the Pharaoh kill all the firstborns of the Jews were trying to?
I
So this is-
forget.
And this is what was done at the end, and it was the last plague, because it affected Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Pharaoh only agreed to let the people go because his son was killed.
Okay,
So let's be
first
clear
born,
about that,
yeah.
okay? And then sometimes things are worse than death, and I think enslavement is worse than death.
So Jordan makes I think the key point here, that the building is closing in 3 minutes. So let me summarize this morning. Let me summarize. I can do it in one of two ways. I can say everything, or I can just be silent for a minute and acknowledge that there's no way to summarize. Yeah, it's been a very rich discussion. What a text it is, isn't it? I mean, in a way, it's a tribute to the text that we get so much and so many different things out of it. So next week, David is going to manage Torah study.
I'm going to be leading the discussion. I'm not a scholar, but.
Oh, I don't know about that.
This is going to be collective work for all of us, participants.
Every time I have somebody to do it, whether it's poetry or whether it's this, I get back and people say, what a section it was. And I'm sure it's going to be just like that. Shabbat shalom.
The reason I spoke out is I was defending you.
Hey, Michael, when I decided to be a rabbi, why didn't somebody say to me, do you know what you're getting into? Let's move away from the mic.
I just wanted to say one thing. I spoke out like that because everything and just like that. It's not accusing It was just unforgivable the way he was, you know, being so factual, so stubborn. And that's why I stood up. I don't know, I'm not going to stand up without my hand being raised, you know, or say what I did. But I mean,
I know.
that's the reality.
I do know exactly what you mean.
I was aggressive like that. I just
Oh, it doesn't, no. Thank you.
That's what I'm saying.
I appreciate it. I don't mind.
But the things I don't think we should be able to, I don't know. Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for saying it. Next week I have a bar mitzvah downtown. We are going out of town early in February. Good. That'd be great. Come on, the mic is still on.
I have a choice finding that out. I think to think about I have to we also we looked at this person differently. So a question is, why are we focusing on the Egyptians